So we can have less time to answer.
We're just cutting up. It's because I had a good lunch, Olivia. That's the reason. It was good. Hope I can find $41,000.
Relax, sir.
Good afternoon and welcome to the regular board meeting of Savannah Chatham Board of Public Education on Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. This is indeed our regular board meeting. This meeting is being live streamed on the district website of www.sccpss.com. I would ask Ms. Mary Davis Brown, our board secretary, if the meeting has been posted in accordance with all the laws requiring public meetings. And she assures me that it has. Notice has also been given in the proper places and in the proper ways. I welcome everyone here today as we come together for this regular board meeting. For the people who are watching us from a different site, Ms. Hines is still recuperating at home, and so she will be joining us via the telephone, and she will be making comments and voting as she chooses. But we welcome all of you here today. I would ask that you join me as we stand and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to call on the Vice President of the Board, Mr. Katchmar, for a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Buck. I move that the approved agenda be amended to add item 8.06, Board Resolution of Support for Second Semester Operations.
You've heard the resolution. Is there, or the motion? Is there a second to that motion? Second by Dr. Hoskins Brown. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. And Ms. Hines, you can tell us. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All opposed? 1. Motion passes 7-1. Ms. Hines, did you vote?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Motion passes 8-1-0. Moving on to announcements. I have no announcements that have been given to me for today. It is also customary here that we recognize those former and present employees of the district who have passed away during the last month. Today, we're fortunate in only having one. Ms. Mildred Smith, Administrative Secretary, retired from Southwest Elementary. If you will just bow your heads, please, with me as we remember Ms. Smith. Thank you. My pleasure to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Ann Levette, who will give us a operational update.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Dr. Buck, officers and members of the board. It's my pleasure to provide a brief update for you in anticipation of additional actions that will take place this afternoon. We have all been affected by the pandemic, and I realize that as we look at the recordings of the board meetings, we have not had the opportunity to celebrate the many achievements that we typically have celebrated pre-COVID. So I want to take back part of that and give you an opportunity to hear, for the record, some of the items, some of the accomplishments that we feel warrant recognition, and hopefully through our District Achievement Showcase, we'll be able to recognize students, staff, and community partners who have contributed to our success during this difficult time. Here are a few of the headlines that we've shared recently we want to make sure everyone knew about. 7 students from our middle and high school levels swept the Tybee MLK Day speech writing contest. Island High School student Logan Lewis is a candidate for the 2021 United States Presidential Scholars Program. We've successfully launched this week the first ever virtual Student Success Expo, and we are premiering several new specialty programs, including Cinematic Studies at Southwest Middle School and our Drone Aviation Pilot Program, which will be at Windsor Forest. Hubert Middle School teacher Marissa Johnson was just named the new Teacher of the Year by the Georgia Association of Family and Consumer Sciences. Mrs. Johnson is a family and consumer science teacher at Hubert. SCCPSS teachers are sought out to record video lessons as part of Georgia Public Broadcasting's Let's Learn Georgia series. We're especially proud to recognize Dr. Jaquetta Jenkins for her service to our country as a member of the 165th Airlift Wing, who served recently in a deployment to provide security support at the Capitol in Washington for the inauguration. A special thank you to Dr. Jenkins for her service to our country. We set a record in participation this year with 8,500 students engaged in the Mountain Film Festival, which for this year was the first festival, of course, virtually for students in our area. We're also proud to announce that our new dental education program, that pathway has launched, and we've reached more than 3,200 students regarding great oral health practices. We did that in collaboration with the Savannah, Georgia chapter of the Links, and also Curtis V. Cooper, and of course our own Academic Affairs Division. We reached those 3,200 second and fourth graders, and we will be moving to the next part of the program, which will involve first and third graders. The Human Resources Department of the Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools was recently recognized by the Georgia Association of School Personnel Administrators for its 2020 Best in Class Awards. And finally, I think everyone knows that SCCPS SCCPSS, and T-Mobile announced the start of a partnership that will provide internet service to thousands of the district's students. T-Mobile is donating over $4 million to Savannah Chatham County Schools families as a part of its Project 10 Million program to deliver free wireless hotspots and free high-speed data to our students and families.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful report, and especially that last item. I was thinking as the superintendent was reading, you know, we've been working hard for years to get hotspots and equipment improved, and we probably would still be years away had it not been for the pandemic. And so it's wonderful that our community partners have stepped forward like they did.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hediger is going to drive, and while he's doing that, I just want to remind everyone that we appreciate very much the efforts of all of our staff and the patience and support of all of our families during this difficult time period. This, as has been repeated, is not an easy time for any of us. There is no perfect solution, but I do take great pride in the fact that we have remained safe, though quite uncomfortable at times. We have remained safe, and I take great pride in that, and thank the staff and our board members for making it possible for us to continue with that safety record. I think it goes without mentioning that we are continuing with virtual instruction. We continue to also engage with our least independent learners, and we will continue to work diligently to meet the needs of those young people during this time period. We are continuing to engage with the class of 2021. They've made it very clear what their expectations are for end of the year celebrations. And I just want to be clear, if I wasn't clear or Mrs. Oliver wasn't clear last time, they have requested specifically that we continue with the curbside celebrations for cap and gown disbursement. But we are planning, as you heard last time, an in-person graduation ceremony with certainly lots of secure procedures in place, and certainly it'll look different, but as our seniors requested and parents as well, it is our plan to have an in-person ceremony. We are engaging students and families that have been non-responsive. We'll continue in that effort. And we're also engaging staff and seeking input. You will recall, board members, that we had a meeting with principals and assistant principals this past Monday. We also met with superintendent's professional senate Monday afternoon. And as you know, personally, we have launched an all-staff survey which really focuses on evolving health conditions, but the focus is really on vaccination. So while we've collected a lot of information or asked people to provide that, our focus is really on how do we prepare for the vaccination period that we expect to engage in shortly. Vaccinations, as I indicated last month and will repeat this month, there is a plan in development. We are working with our partners as well as Dr. Davis and his staff. The availability of the vaccine is a concern, of course, all across the county, all across the nation. Nursing staff is in the initial stages of training on the administration of the vaccine, and in our conversation with teachers, they've also shared with us their thoughts about the nurses being engaged in that process. We have deployment remains in stage 1A for those who are ages 65 and over and caregivers, and we have issued communication to our staff to remind them, including in the survey, to remind them, and if you are a caregiver, that you also may qualify to take the vaccine early. So we want to make sure that people get that information. The survey, a staff survey, was deployed to seek a level of interest in a number of issues, and it closes on Friday. I want to take this time especially to thank, and I don't have enough words to do it, our COVID-19 case management team. This is a team that works almost 24/7. Whenever we are alerted to any situation, any possibility, they are ready to meet. In fact, our first meeting outside of school hours took place early on in the pandemic on a Saturday morning. And so we are often on those calls Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Monday night, whenever it's necessary, so that we can make good decisions about stopping the spread. And unfortunately, we've been very busy lately. But I do want to take the time to thank our district staff, our nurses, our licensed medical professionals, as well as our partners and the Coastal Health District who are in with us on those decisions. They have active reviews, they do contact tracing, and they also recommend and instruct persons on quarantining. Athletics, of course, as you are very well aware, has become a recent area of focus, and we will need to always be prepared for temporary closures. We believe that that is our reality through school year 2021. I'd like to thank the staff and families who have been very agile and amenable to understanding when we've had to close, and we appreciate that. So we often get questions about, how well we're mitigating, and I just cannot say enough about the support staff, maintenance and operations, as well as school staff who make sure that we are trying to do everything humanly possible to make sure our spaces, all of them, schools and other spaces, are clean and are being done so in with CDC guidance. We have completed this miraculous process of changing all the school filters have been replaced. We're actually getting ready to start on the second round. We also have non-contact water stations. You will notice them in all of the buildings. We have installed 340, and we've also been able to do that with the support of some community donations. Hand sanitizers are touchless. There are 418 of those that have been issued, and thermal temperature systems, the non-contact ones, 292 of those have been issued, including one here in this building. Mitigation strategies, which of course is the key to all of this. Here are non-negotiable protocols and mitigation strategies, and we expect that they will be implemented and executed with fidelity at all sites. Just as when you came into this building, even visitors to all buildings must subject to questions, temperature checks, and if they do not wish to do that, they are not allowed entry. We require that people wear masks. Social distancing is required, and we stress 6'15", 6 feet, and we ask that you not maintain any kind of interaction for more than 15 minutes, especially we're asking that people maintain that distance. We are not supporting, encouraging, promoting, or allowing large gatherings. We've had several requests from staff to have large group meetings. We are not doing that. We are following the CDC guidance, especially now that we've come back from the holiday. Professional learning for all employees included, but was not limited to the workplace guidance and expectations, which, by the way, was updated in January, and I personally made sure that it was reissued to every employee in the district. And also I've asked certain departments to make sure that they print and provide paper copies for those persons who may not be inclined to look at the electronic copy. We have established staggered arrival and dismissal times, and we've also provided parent and student videos with required sign-off. So if you're not familiar with our mitigation strategies, here's a quick summary for you. Return to learn, our least independent learners. You've heard us talk about them at each meeting. I'm going to ask Dr. Hancock to quickly review this information for you. Much of this you have heard repeatedly, but I think it bears repeating, so sometimes, I may not be hearing the other reports at other times, so I want to make sure that we have this on the record.
Good afternoon. The least independent learners discussed in this presentation refer to students served in a separate self-contained classroom. These students include Language Enriched Autism Program, or LEAP, Preschool Intervention, PSI classrooms, preparing students with autism for classroom education, PACE, adaptive students, and students enrolled in Coastal Georgia Comprehensive Academy. We currently have 441 students requesting to return in person and 341 who want to remain virtual. PPE for staff are on hand and are being delivered to sites this week for all of the least independent learner staff. We recently conducted an in-house survey of our least independent learner staff on their preferences for return to learn and found that the majority of staff preferred more days of in-person with students. Due to the unique learning challenges of these students, we are advocating for them to return to an in-person learning model with the greatest number of on-site days as possible, which accommodates for staff and student safety. This would allow the district to continue prioritizing learning and supports for our students identified as needing the highest level of support. In-person therapy services will be offered as discussed at the last board meeting to these students by appointment. Summer academies are under development by the Learning Support Services team to continue providing extended learning opportunities for virtual and in-person learning. And that's the update for the least independent learners.
Thank you. We continue to do the work to ensure that we are serving those young people, even during this difficult time. During the last meeting, we talked about the 3-2 model, and the graphic was not what it was supposed to be. We apologize for that. But I do want Mrs. Ball-Oliver to quickly just go over this so that we're clear on what the 3-2 model includes.
Good afternoon, and as Dr. Levette said, we apologize for the previous graphic. I believe you've all received the updated graphic via email, but just to review on our 3-2 model, weeks 1 and 2, Cohort A, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in person with their Thursday and Friday being virtual learning, and Cohort B, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday participating in virtual learning with their Thursday and Friday being in person. Weeks 3 and 4 for Cohort A, Monday and Tuesday are in-person days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are virtual. Students in Cohort B will be in virtual on Monday and Tuesday, with Wednesday through Friday being their in-person days. The graphic now depicts that Wednesdays, of course, are no longer independent learning, and it shows that the only shift for in-person learning days that would require schedule changes would be the Wednesday. So the students would retain 2 days of in-person learning that are consistent and same.
Thank you. Mr. Austin, with Data and Accountability, will share the following information regarding the second semester parent survey.
Good afternoon. I'm pleased to present the data from our most recent. Okay. Once again, good afternoon. I'm pleased to present the data from the most recent Return to Learn survey. This survey was deployed towards the end of November. We sent the survey out to over 30,000 families, and just under 18,000 families responded. So looking at the survey questions, the first, my child is currently in hybrid, and I wish for him or her to return to in hybrid. Overall, we had a response of 4,616 families chose to remain hybrid. Question 2, my child is currently in virtual, and I wish for him or her to change to hybrid. And we had 4,687 families respond that they would like to make the switch from virtual to hybrid. So that puts our overall hybrid numbers in the district to 12,253. Now that number is compiled from all of our Return to Learn survey activities that we conducted last semester and that are currently enrolled in PowerSchool. And that 12,253 is just under 1/3 of our overall student population. And you can see that we also have the individual grade configuration breakdowns of the responses by numbers and percentages. And our second set of questions. My child is currently hybrid, and I wish to change to virtual. So we had 302 families that responded that they would like to make the move from hybrid to virtual. And then the fifth question, my child is currently virtual, and I wish for him or her to remain virtual. And we had 7,728 families respond that they would like to remain virtual. Next, I'd like to present information on our staff poll numbers. On February 1st, we polled principals and assistant principals, which comprise our building level leadership, along with the superintendent's professional senate, so that we'd have the most current poll data to share with you today. Okay. I'd like to call your attention to the graphs. You can see that we have the percentages along with the numbers of responses, or N sizes as we like to call them. So in figure 1, what is more important to you in making operational decisions of the district? And we can clearly see that the level of COVID Chatham County metrics was the most popular response for both the principals and the Senate. In figure 2, if an in-person learning model was considered, the best timing launch is, and again, overwhelmingly from both principals and the Senate, the March 15th start of the fourth quarter was the popular response. In figure 3, the in-person learning model for second semester should, and we see the popular response for both principals and the Senate, stay on the phase 3 in-person 2-3 hybrid model. Although we do see that 43% of the Senate did say stay 100% virtual, so there is a significant number of Senate members that preferred the 100% virtual model. Figure 4, what do you believe is the most important? And the response, the popular response, overwhelmingly from both the Senate and the principals, was offer a consistent learning model that remains unchanged for the remainder of school year 2021. Figure 5, for students who have remained 100% virtual, the district should require those who have not engaged in learning to report to in-person on an assigned cohort. And the popular response from both the Senate and principals was yes. In figure 6, I would feel more comfortable at work knowing my colleagues received the vaccination. And the popular response, again, from both the Senate and the principals was yes. Figure 7, the following information would help in determining my decision on getting the vaccine. And they were asked to select all that apply. The most popular choice was safety concerns and side effects, followed by the reliability of the effectiveness of the vaccine. And that concludes information on our most recent poll data. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson.
Thank you. So today's February 3rd. Our operation, as approved on November the 13th, under which we have been operating, the second semester model on January 11th, which we certainly spoke about last time, was that we would remain in phase 3 hybrid expanded learning model with those waitlist students that we referenced receiving in-person learning based on the return of teachers on January the 4th. And I'm really proud to say that most of our staff has returned to our school buildings, and I think most are now feeling a little more comfortable than they were prior to now. Additional students requesting in-person instruction will be considered based on capacity limitations per social distancing requirements. Virtual learning shall always remain an option for families, should they choose, especially for the remainder of this year. And I do want to remind all persons listening that we were very fortunate earlier this year, school year, to establish our e-learning academy, which is a school. It is not a program, it's a school. So students may enroll in it as students, as permanent students. In-person instruction shall be subject to the November 4th, 2020 board action that defines the thresholds for virtual learning. Expanded in-person learning options shall be offered under the 3-day, 2-day rotation with learning partner model to be implemented by the superintendent on a timeline that is operationally feasible. Implementation would occur only after a review of COVID transmission levels has determined that transmission rates are an acceptable risk as defined by the Board of Education. And such review shall take place no later than February 3rd. We did have a special call workshop where we reviewed, frankly, most of the information that we had reviewed in our retreat on November 6th. We looked at all the models. The 3-2 model had, at that time, actually already been adopted by the board as the way to move forward. But we did find it useful to review the other models at the workshop. Right now, Savannah Chatham County Public Schools second semester learning remains in a virtual mode due to the thresholds set by board action on November 4th. As we have promised at each meeting, I promised as the lead person of the organization on the administration side that we would review the transmission rates at least every 30 days. As you see, and as Dr. Davis referenced this morning, we have seen some dips. On January the 24th, we were at, again, the highest point we had been during the summer. But as you see, since that time, the community transmission rate has dropped down to 573, although all indicators as identified by the board in this action are still in the red category. We have, of course, learned lots of information since November 4th, and we anticipate during this meeting that we will be looking at another board resolution which invites us to consider how to move forward. I want to take this time to say just a few things, as Dr. Buck knows. This has been a very difficult time for all of us, and I am sometimes dismayed by the way we model for children how to handle our differences. The pandemic has broken open once stable alliances and created more division and tense moments than any of us would like to acknowledge. Communities have become increasingly divided on core issues like when to open schools for in-person instruction, how much synchronous instruction schools should offer in remote learning, the length of the school day, whether visitors can come in or out, and what to do for children who may not thrive under remote instruction. These challenges will last long after the pandemic. Students who are facing major gaps in learning and unaddressed trauma will require new investments in services, just as increasing expenses associated with this public health crisis will create painful budget challenges. During this crisis, we have no longer had the comfort of following routines. We continue in nearly every aspect of our individual lives to navigate a shifting environment where new information, often conflicting information, one person says you can do 6 feet, another person says you can do 3 feet, somebody says you can crack the window, somebody says we have to be concerned about people who have asthma. A myriad of opinions and agendas and competing and multiple demands to meet specific and individual needs are emerging all the time, every day. Everyone's an expert. And if we don't do what individuals want us to do, then we are wrong. The school district experiences the same fluctuations, just like we do as individuals, except we are not charged with doing something for individual households. We are responsible, as Mr. Austin indicated, for looking at the needs of households of our students and our employees. A grand total on any given day of at least 42,000 people. Not 4 people, not 6 people, 42,000 people. We are all adapting, often reluctantly, often stubbornly, and growing more weary each day of the restrictions and the disruptions to our pre-COVID existence. Yes, we're all tired. I don't want to wear 1 mask. I don't want to wear 2. And I certainly don't want to wear 3. But if I want to be here on the other side of this, I'm going to have to do some of that. We're all uncomfortable. Our professional and ethical obligation has allowed us to strengthen and form new alliances with some social service agencies, health agencies, municipal leaders, community organizations. Frankly, the political affiliation has nothing to do with what we do for our children. We have mobilized our central offices to do unfamiliar and late-night tasks. And we every day cope with conflicting political pressures about whether to open schools or to maintain remote learning. It is not a secret. We would like for our students to be in the buildings. We are fortunate to have established an option for those who prefer remote learning to in-person learning. While incredibly difficult, we must continue to support those on the front lines of our work who simply want to serve children to the best of their ability while maintaining a safe environment for all. I cannot sit here as a leader of this organization and tell you I don't worry about the children who are not learning. We're all concerned. And when we call them and they say, I cannot be there because I have to work 3 jobs, we are affected by that. I want it to be very clear that the people in this room and the people out in those buildings want our children to be in front of us, but we also want our staff and our students and our families to know that we are doing everything we can to make sure that everyone is safe. If there is an objective review of our work since March 2020, you will see a clear demonstration of our commitment to safety first. That is my personal commitment and my focus every day. And I appreciate and welcome the support of all of those who share this value. Board members, staff, and families, it is easier to give up at a time like this, to say to people, you know what? I don't have to do this. And we've had employees who say, I can't manage this. But we continue to come in here and go into our buildings and give our very, very best to children under very, very stressful conditions. So I want to say to the teachers who write to us and say, you don't care. We do. We care. We also are doing what we see happening across this country and trying to balance the individual needs versus the greater good. Safety must remain the priority. I thank you for your support. I thank you for your patience, and I thank you for your compassion as we all continue to navigate these strange times. There is no perfect answer. From the beginning of this conundrum, We have learned to adapt to the unpredictability and uncertainty. So we shall continue to seek clarity. I look forward to hearing the resolution and discussion this afternoon that tells us where we're going with our next steps. In the meantime, thank you for this opportunity to serve my community, the community where I grew up. I'm not coming here from someplace else. I'm vested. So I only want the best for our children and our staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Superintendent. Well thought out remarks, and I'm certain we all can profit from taking those to heart. Thank you very much. Are we ready for the Teacher of the Year presentation?
While we're waiting, can I just say a word about the Teacher of the Year and instructional support person role? I get so many calls and emails from teachers with their various ideas and complaints. And when I say, have you spoken with your school Teacher of the Year, your representative to the Teacher Senate? Oh, no, I didn't know that I was supposed to. So I would just like us to please encourage all of our Teachers of the Year and our instructional support persons of the year to take your position, not just as ceremonial, that you were, anointed Teacher of the Year, but that's a robust, active job where you try to find out all of the ideas and problems of the teachers in your particular site so that they can be represented when you come to the Teacher Senate meetings. Because it seems it's just a thing. I know how hard you work, but it seems like lots of the teachers don't understand that Teacher of the Year in their building is for them to have access to discuss things that really should not end up in a phone conversation with a board member. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hall, and you heard what she said, and I know that you will follow up with the instructional folks and with the teachers. She makes a very good point. We welcome you.
Yes, thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Good to have you back.
Yes, it's good to be here. And on that note, I'm here to report from the latest meeting from the Superintendent's Professional Senate, the meeting of the Teachers of the Year and the Instructional Support People of the Year. At the meeting on January the 20th, there was a presentation by the associate superintendents of the different learning models that were going to be explored for the second semester, including the modified traditional in-person pre-K through 12 model, the elementary in-person and secondary virtual learning model, the 3-day, 2-day rotation with learning partner, the 2-week rotation with learning partner, and the half-day rotation. Following the presentation of the various learning models, we participated in 3 different polls. And the first poll included questions about social distancing protocols, our feelings about enforcement of social distancing on buses, what we consider to be non-negotiable in terms of for maintaining a safe and healthy working environment, our feelings on whether or not students should continue to wear masks in school, and also about providing meals to students that are in person. Our second, also included was a question about aftercare by the YMCA at schools. Our second set of questions included questions about the use of the Independent Learning Day on Wednesday for remediation and enrichment, our concerns about current transmission rates and whether or not students should be considered which students should be considered for in-person learning given those rates, what our concerns were as teachers and staff the most, and what steps would help us feel more comfortable with returning to in-person learning, and which of the instructional delivery models we felt would be most workable for all of the district. The final set of questions included whether or not, as employees, we would be interested in getting the vaccine, whether or not we have received the first vaccine, what the learning model should be based on existing transmission rates, and if we should change the learning model when planning for the remaining of the second semester, and what the fourth quarter learning model should be. We concluded the meeting with a question and answer session with Dr. Levette and the associate superintendents. Subjects discussed included the challenge of student participation in the environment that we're in right now. We also asked questions about how the district has been monitoring school districts and private schools that are in person, and the district's efforts to pay particular attention to districts that are like us, in cities that have rates that are high and demographics that would be comparable to us, so that we can make decisions. It was also shared with us that the district is exploring a vaccination program, working with community partners in order to get teachers vaccinated. We discussed intermittent Wi-Fi, and also the superintendent reassured us, just as she did everyone today here, that safety is the first concern, that she hears all of the concerns about students not being back in the classroom that is shared by members of the community and staff, and that it is going to be a joint effort for all of us in order to bring those students back to school. And finally, we also took a moment to celebrate, because at the moment that we were having our professional senate, one of our own was sworn in as a United States Senator. Reverend Raphael Warnock, Johnson High, class of 1987, most likely succeed, was elected to the U.S. Senate. So we closed by celebrating that moment. And those are the minutes from our professional senate.
Thank you. I was just laughing about most likely to succeed. I certainly wouldn't have gotten that award when I graduated. It certainly worked for him, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Dennis, Dr. Hoskins Brown?
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. And this is not a question as much as it is a comment. I really appreciate the way that you are presenting this information. It's really important narrative for us behind the numbers of the survey information that we received. So I appreciate the detail that you're giving to us in this report, because it's really allowing me to hear the voices of the faculty senate. So kudos and keep up the great job.
Thank you so much. And to Ms. Hall's point, I will make sure to communicate back to the Teachers of the Year and the Instructional Support People of the Year to reach out to their staff members, that we are the conduit for their voices, and we want them to be heard, and we're here to communicate that to all of you.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis.
I just want to offer a special thank you to Mrs. Dennis and Mr. Nesbitt, who's not here. They are available to us, and they will work with us and forward us questions that come to them. The Senate's always important, but this year they have particularly been available and willing to meet on short notice. Mrs. Dennis is always willing to put forth questions that come to her, and she's always very even. She hears, but she's also she has a very calm approach in listening and sharing the concerns and saying, this is coming up repeatedly, so we need to make sure that we address it. So I want to thank you for your stewardship, and I want to thank you for your maturity, and I want to thank you for being a great leader of our teachers.
Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate those compliments.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. We appreciate you. Moving on, still only one speaker. We have a speaker, Mr. Marco George, to speak. You had been given a resolution by the Ministerial Alliance because they couldn't be here. He came, so you actually already, I guess, have a copy of that. But anyway, he's going to speak to us for 5 minutes.
And this is Savannah Alliance of Pastors.
Savannah Alliance of Pastors. I'm sorry, called it the wrong thing. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. We welcome you, sir. You have 5 minutes, sir. Speak.
Good afternoon, Dr. Buck, Dr. Levette, to the school board and all those present. I come on behalf of the Savannah Alliance of Pastors. I'm Reverend Marco George, Executive Office Manager and Assistant Pastor at the First African Baptist Church. The Savannah Alliance of Pastors held a press conference on yesterday to call on the Board of Education to continue its strategic plan for safely opening schools to students in accordance with the Center for Disease Control guidelines. This call is to stand in concert with the spirit and guidelines of the Chatham County Board of Commissioners, as well as that of the City of Savannah City Council. Savannah Alliance of Pastors agrees with the CDC that it is critical for schools to open as safely and as quickly as possible for in-person learning. We care about our students and staff. Nevertheless, the schools do not operate independently of the community. The burden of reducing our community transmission index and our daily case rates falls squarely on the community. These two key indicators of community safety have been hovering at an all-time pandemic high for the entire month of January. The community has not yet done its part in slowing the spread of the COVID-19, rendering public gatherings like school unsafe at this time. We are as far from the green safety level as we have been, and medical personnel are predicting that we are entering some of the most dangerous weeks for the pandemic that we have seen in our region, our state, as well as on a nationwide level. The members of the Pastors Alliance are aware of pandemic fatigue and the overall decline in mental health in the community members. We know that folks are tired of the isolation and want to gather and resume normal life. We see it in our own houses of worship, but the risks are as high as they have ever been, and we are doing our part to help the community get back to safety by meeting virtually, even as houses of worship are putting stringent protocols for the few that are gathering in person, like doing things by drive-up worships, outside worship, attendance, things of that nature. The Savannah Alliance of Pastors recognizes the public pressure that the members of the Board of Education face. The board has a structured plan in place for reopening schools, and so the task at hand is to review the community health conditions established by your own standards and to act accordingly. The Savannah Alliance of Pastors sees this as a time to prepare for reentry when we get to the green safety zones from the indicators, including mitigation in all the buildings and giving teachers and staff an opportunity to get vaccinated. Savannah Alliance of Pastors is speaking out to protect those most vulnerable in our community, the poor, the elderly, those persons of color who have been hardest hit by the pandemic in terms of infection, chronic illness, and death rates. This includes student and staff in our school system. We care for those who do not have access to the great health care and those whose difficult lives make them more vulnerable to the worst aspects of the virus. We recognize this as a community health issue and a justice issue. We're not here to beat up on the school board. This is a community issue. Savannah Alliance of Pastors is an interfaith clergy organization that represents thousands of people of faith throughout Chatham County. And on this particular statement, it has been signed by the Reverend Thomas J. Seal, pastor of Connors Temple Baptist Church, Reverend Dr. Andrew Young, pastor of Mosaic United Methodist Church, my pastor, Reverend Thurman Neal Tillman, pastor of First African Baptist Church, Rabbi Robert Hawes of Congregation McVie Israel, Reverend Billy Hester, pastor of Asbury Memorial Church, Reverend Claire Merritt, associate pastor of Asbury Memorial Church, Reverend Charles Robeson, pastor of Kingdom Life Christian Fellowship, Reverend Dr. Eric Mason, pastor of Jesus First Community Church, Reverend Dr. DeHonre Thurman, Senior, pastor of St. Paul CME Church, Reverend Quentin Morris, pastor of Tremont Memorial Baptist Church, Reverend Richard Hall, pastor of Second Arnold Missionary Baptist Church, Reverend Marsha Buford, pastor of House of Favor Full Gospel Ministry, Reverend Xavier Creekmore, pastor of Second African Baptist Church. Reverend Damian Gordon, pastor of First Jerusalem Missionary Baptist Church. Bishop Willie Farrell, pastor of the Royal Church of Christ. Reverend Andre Osborne, pastor of First Tabernacle Baptist Church. Reverend Donald Lowe, pastor of God's Temple of Praise. Reverend Ashley Randall, pastor of Garden City United Methodist Church. Reverend Kenneth Roche, pastor of Brandon Hart's Church. Bishop James Wright Sr., Pentecostal Miracle Deliverance Center. Reverend Genario Campbell Sr., pastor of Deliverance Prayer Tower. And yours truly, Reverend Marco George, Executive Office Manager, First African Baptist Church. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Thank you very much, Reverend George. We appreciate you being here and giving us your opinions. Thank you. Mr. Hediger, that's our last speaker. Moving on to Board of Education matters, I'm going to ask that we change our order a little bit, and I'm going to go first to 8.05, the board resolution about vaccination priorities. I've asked Mr. Hediger to read that to us. We'll follow that with the board resolution of support for second semester operations, and then go back up to the policies.
Thank you, Mr. Board President, Madam Superintendent, board officers, and members of the board. As we have today on this February 3rd, 2021, a resolution of support for vaccination priorities. The Board of Public Education for the City of Savannah and County of Chatham recognizes the impact the COVID-19 pandemic has had on our staff and students. As a public institution that serves more than 37,000 students and employs 5,600 employees, we recognize the importance of taking all measures to protect against the transmission of the virus, including the critical need for having access to the COVID-19 vaccination as a priority in mitigating risk and keeping our schools and families safe for all students and staff. Whereas the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has affected large numbers of students, teachers, and other staff throughout our area, and whereas the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices has recommended that the education sector be prioritized as frontline essential workers in the phased approach for the dissemination of vaccines, and whereas we believe that employees of school systems serve as key contributors to our community and have a significant role as critical infrastructure workforce, and whereas the education sector should be afforded an expedited schedule for access to the vaccination, and whereas that in order to provide our students the safest learning environment available, it is critical that staff be provided every mitigation factor up to and including the COVID-19 vaccine. And whereas the importance of mitigating strong public schools, of maintaining strong public schools, particularly in times of crisis, is paramount. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Public Education for the City of Savannah and the County of Chatham does hereby adopt this resolution to urge that the federal government, the state of Georgia, the Georgia Department of Health, and the Centers for Disease Control provide higher priority for any individual working in a school building or working in a functional support or administrative role within a school district to have access to the COVID-19 vaccination, and to do so as expeditiously as possible.
You've heard the resolution. Is there a motion to that effect? Mr. Catchmore moves. Ms. Hall seconds. Mr. Catchmore, anything? Ms. Hall, anything? Other board members, we've heard this discussion already. Dr. Brinkman.
I implore everyone in Chatham County to please write their congressman, their House of Representatives, any other elected official that actually can take action on this to make this both a state and nationwide first priority to trying to get to where we can reopen schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brinkman. Any other comments from board members?
Dr. Buck?
Oh, Ms. Hines, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Thought God was talking to me.
Dr. Buck?
Yes, ma'am.
You hear me?
Ms. Hines, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Ms. Hines, they can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can hear you now.
I am in total agreement with the resolution that was read and with the statements and comments that were responded by the board members. And I think we can do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Any other comments from board members? All in favor of the resolution, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 from Ms. Hines. So the motion passes 9-0-0. Thank you, board, for passing that resolution. Moving on to the next resolution, which is of support for second semester operations. That's a lengthy resolution, but I'm going to ask Mr. Hediger to read it to us also, and then we'll discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Board President, Madam Superintendent, board officers, members of the board. We do have a resolution of support for second semester operations to be read into record and taken into consideration for board action. Like other school districts around the country, Savannah Chatham Public Schools has addressed its primary mission of educating students in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic by attempting to balance the concerns of students, families, district staff, and the community with scientifically based guidance and recommendations that have evolved as to the understanding of the pandemic and related mitigation strategies as they have also evolved. Current guidance from the Centers for Disease Control indicates that opening schools for in-person learning as safely and quickly as possible and keeping them open is important given the many known and established benefits of in-person learning. In order to enable in-person learning and assist schools with their day-to-day operations, it is important to adopt and diligently implement actions to slow the spread of the virus that causes COVID-19 inside the school and in the community. Implementing these actions in schools will reduce the risk of in-school spread of COVID-19 regardless of underlying community burden, with risk being the lowest if community spread is low and proven mitigation strategies are implemented consistently. In addition, the school district's implementation of a hybrid learning model in the first semester of the 2020-2021 school year, where families were provided the option of virtual or in-person learning, provided the district the opportunity to implement and enhance COVID-19 mitigation strategies. Therefore, be it resolved that the board will support the following items as implemented by the superintendent for the remainder of the SY 2020-2021 school year. That the district implement the 3-day, 2-day rotation with learning partner in-person learning model approved during the November 13th, 2020 board meeting and further presented during the January 2021 board meeting for all pre-K through 12 families as soon as practicable on a timeline that is operationally feasible, and that the district provide notice of the date that such return to in-person learning will occur as soon as practicable. The board set a specially called meeting or set aside time at a future informal meeting to review, discuss, and plan for the budget impact of this resolution on the current and future budgets. Consistent with the district's COVID-19 mitigation practices and guidelines, each school will be afforded the flexibility to increase in-person learning days as operationally feasible and coordinated through the district for students choosing in-person learning if the enrollment ratios of students choosing in-person and virtual will allow for it. Virtual learning shall remain an option for all pre-K through 12 families through the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year, except that the district shall identify students with significant attendance or academic performance issues related to virtual learning and shall work with them and their families to either address and correct such issues or require such students to return to in-person learning.
Also, that least independent learners, as identified by district staff, shall be offered a return to in-person learning 5 days per week at a date that is operationally feasible as determined by the superintendent or consistent with their learning plans that were in place prior to the district's modification of operations due to the COVID-19 pandemic, or as they may have been subsequently modified. Thus, be it further resolved that the board also supports the following items to be implemented by the superintendent. That the district begin planning for a return to in-person learning 5 days per week in the spring semester of SY 2020-2021. If and when COVID-19 vaccines are available to district employees whose primary place of employment is in a school building or requires interaction with students, such as transportation employees, and that the district implement such plan as soon as practicable on a timeline that is operationally feasible following the availability of such vaccines. The district planned for a robust 2020 summer school program offering families not only enrichment but also opportunities for remediation and enhancement, and that the district provide notice of such plan as soon as practicable so that district staff and families can plan. Also, that the district plan for and study for the feasibility of beginning the 2021-2022 school year with a 5 days per week in-person learning model. And that the district continue to monitor and take into account data and guidance from federal and state governments, related agencies, including local COVID-19 data from the Georgia Department of Health and Coastal Health District, and the Centers for Disease Control to implement and maintain recommended COVID-19 mitigation strategies, including but not limited to those related to cleaning, sanitation, personal hygiene, masking, social distancing, reducing capacities in schools, altering and or reducing transportation offerings and capacities, and targeted quarantining, including the need for temporary closures for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year and beyond as appropriate. Further, that school district families and staff and the community are highly encouraged to get COVID-19 vaccinations when available, and they should consult with their medical or other advisors about the safety, efficacy, and appropriateness of such vaccinations for them. And that consistent with CDC guidelines, students, families, teachers, school staff, and all community members should take action to protect themselves and others where they live, work, learn, and play by following guidelines for mitigating the spread of COVID-19, including wearing a mask, social distancing, personal hygiene, and avoiding crowds. And that this resolution supersedes previous board actions on these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Hediger. You've heard the resolution. Board members, is there a motion to that effect? Ms. Hall moves. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, Ms. Hines seconds.
Irene
Okay.
Hines.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. I didn't see you. Comments from Ms. Hall, and then from Ms. Hines, and then other board members.
Okay, Dr. Buck, I would like it if Dr. Levette could just flesh out the term operationally feasible so that we're all on the same wavelength as far as that's concerned.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I've asked her to do that, and she will do it right now.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Hall, for that question. I think in each of the meetings, we have spoken to our readiness for ensuring that staff would be safe and that students would be safe. We also promised in that very first meeting of the year, I will say the board meeting in late September, that if we decided to change models, that we would give our families time to prepare for any change. So what we promised then and what we continue to see as feasible is having about a 2-week period. Our intent, though, is to make sure that our least independent learners who will need some adjustment will need to have an opportunity to come into those buildings first so that they can get settled before the other students come into the building. So that would be that priority that we would like to establish. But as much as I would like to say tomorrow, that's not good for parents, for most parents who will need to make adjustments to their schedules. And also we will say just like we did with The other model, prior to Christmas, parents and families also need to have an emergency plan so that if we are closed, they will have a way to have their students or to have their children cared for during the time of a closure. So for us, operationally feasible means operations, I think we are fine. I think our staff is ready. They're in the buildings, and those who are on exemption are appropriately assigned. When it comes to parent notification, we will need to notify parents and give them time to get ready.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Hall, do you have anything else you'd like to say? Ms. Hines, anything you'd like to comment on, dear?
Yes, sir. I would like to say, Dr. Buck, and to my board members, I feel that the superintendent and her workforce, the ones that work very closely with her, as it has been said already today, have worked tirelessly, coming together for the best plan that we can come up with our students right now, keeping families, keeping parents, grandparents safe. And I strongly believe that they've losing the thought for words here, but I strongly believe that they have the interests of our students as well in the school system. And I can't see why we as board members cannot continue to be behind the superintendent and her workers and co-workers that as this plan comes to fruition, I know that they are, having been an educator for over 30 years, and we've never had anything like this to come upon us before, I know that they are seeking the best for our students as well as our support folk and teachers. And that's all I have to say, except I will be supporting this resolution today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hines. I have Dr. Hoskins-Brown.
Thank you, Dr. Buck and Dr. Levette. I appreciate the work that's gone into this resolution. I am not able to support it in its current form. I particularly have an issue with item number 12, which says that the resolution supersedes previous board actions on these issues. And the nature of my challenge is that it removes the metric that would indicate when to close and when to reopen a school. And so I would like to offer an amendment that number 12 read, this resolution supersedes previous board actions on these issues. The superintendent and staff will continue to use transmission within school, site, and facility data to make school, site, facility closure and reopening decisions.
You've heard the proposed amendment by Dr. Hoskins-Brown. Is there a second to that amendment? Ms. Hall seconds that amendment. Dr. Hoskins-Brown, any other discussion you'd like at this point?
No, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Hall, anything you'd like to say? Is there other discussion on the amendment from Board Member Mr. Johnson?
The only thing I would like to say on that amendment is that the superintendent already has that authority. Being the superintendent of the schools, I don't think that we should need to necessarily put that in within this resolution, because she already has it by virtue of her position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any other comments from board members? Dr. Hoskins-Brown and then Ms. Hall.
I would simply say that in address to that particular fact about this resolution is that that is true of all of the components of the resolution as it stands. And so if that is the basis upon which we don't add that material, then I would suggest that we don't need a resolution, because all of those things already exist without this current resolution. So I fail to be able to support it without the inclusion of the change. And I respect the work of my colleagues.
Thank you, Dr. Hoskins-Brown. Ms. Hall.
I just think for transparency's sake and for clarity that Dr. Hoskins-Brown's amendment certainly would add that to it, because there is that question of At what point would this happen? At what point would that happen? And this would provide assurance for what Mr. Johnson says, that everyone understands that the superintendent will make that decision, and it's not just based on how she feels on a particular day. It's based on solid ground. So,
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Mr. Katchmar?
Yeah, the discussion we've had over the last few months is about, should we have specific metrics that that are bright lines that trigger certain actions, or as guidance on these issues has evolved and CDC has said you should move away from bright line triggers and look at overall conditions. I think I will support the amendment because I think it's consistent with more recent guidance, and in fact it's consistent with paragraph 9 of the resolution, which says we're going to continue to look at data from various governments and including data on transmission levels. So I think clarifying that we're going to continue to use data focused on COVID-19 transmission within the schools is appropriate, and it bolsters paragraph 9 as well.
Thank you, Mr. Katchmar. Ms. Grabowski?
Thank you, Dr. Buck. I, too, can support the amendment. I also believe that this entire resolution, I believe, is a positive step forward for us as a board and as a district, as it recognizes the continuing evolution of information that we have available to us from the scientific community, from the CDC. We all know that they recently released and updated their guidelines just very recently, I believe it's last week. And I believe this resolution takes those into consideration. And in particular, with Dr. Hoskins-Brown's amendment, I believe that incorporates the nuance that we need to not make it an on-off switch, as the November 4th resolution did for the entire district, but that this presents an opportunity for it to be more on a case-by-case basis, which I believe is what is appropriate. I do have a couple of clarifying questions, if I may go ahead and pose those now.
On the amendment?
No, I'm sorry, not on the amendment. Okay.
Wait, we need to talk only to the amendment, and then we'll vote.
Thank you.
Next. Any other comments from board members on the amendment? Hearing none, please, if you're in favor of the amendment, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ms. Hines, are you for or against?
Aye.
4. So 6.
Count Hines.
I thought she said aye. Excuse me.
Aye.
So 6, all opposed, raise your hands, please. 3, the amendment to the motion passes 6-3-0. We're now moving back to the original motion as amended with the statement that was just read by Dr. Hoskins-Brown as an amendment. Comments from board members?
I would like to, but I never. Tanya had her hand up before me.
Well,
so I would like to speak
I'm going to
too.
call on Ms. Grabowski first because she was trying to talk at the wrong time. Ms. Grabowski, Dr. Howard Hall, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Brinkman.
Sorry, I'm going to claim newbie for one more meeting. And
That's okay.
thank you. This is a question about the least independent learners, so this might be for Dr. Hancock. As I understand it, the least independent learners we're referencing are those that are in a self-contained independent classroom. Is that correct? And how does this impact, or does this impact our less independent learners that are included in an inclusion classroom?
At this time, we are recommending for this resolution that it will be all students who have least independent learner in their IEP. So it will be our self-contained students served in a separate classroom, but we do have a few others that have high needs that have gotten that label that we will include in the 5 days as well.
Okay, thank you. And then I also had a question about item number 3 in regards to the opportunity for each school to be afforded the flexibility to increase in-person learning days as operationally feasible and coordinated through the district. Would this also apply to the number of students that might be able to be accommodated on their campus based on their specific school arrangement, size, et cetera. I'm trying to get a sense of if that hybrid is locked at a 50% capacity number, or if each school would have that flexibility in order to accommodate the number of students specific to their school. Does that make sense?
Mrs. Miller-Kegler has on several occasions presented the information about school capacity, maintaining 6 feet distance. That is the criteria that we use. You wish to address the issue?
And we've provided the most recent configuration based on 50%. And as I stated, we take a look at the size of each classroom. Some of our more established schools have a different size, but we do have a standard that's provided by the state now with all of our new construction. And we had several configurations at the beginning of the pandemic where we went and actually modeled what that configuration should be based on the size, elementary, middle, and a couple of high schools as well.
Okay, so there would be that flexibility on a school-by-school basis.
And we'll
based
take
on
a
the
look at
condition.
it. And the majority of them we can group based on when they were designed and built, especially for our most recent models. We know what the size of those buildings are, but we have provided that matrix. We have a matrix if there's a need to go back in and reevaluate, but certainly the staff went through some of the classrooms in each of those buildings based on elementary, middle, and high school.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall, Mr. Johnson, and Dr. Brinkman. Dr. Howard.
Yes, and you know, we all agree that we must do what's best. We must do what's best for the good of our students, what's best for the good of our faculty, and what's best for the good of our staff. It takes a team to educate all of our students, all 37,000 of them. Our team consists of 5,600 employees. Without them, who would be there to educate our students? Who would be there to make sure that they're fed? Who would be there to transport them, to sanitize the buildings and ensure that they're clean? Who would be there to enroll them and counsel them? This resolution is recommending schools reopen despite the local COVID-19 transmission rates, despite January having the highest death rate, despite the fact that there is a mutant strain of COVID-19 which makes it more contagious, despite the fact that many of our employees are vulnerable because they are caregivers of family members with underlying health issues, despite the fact that the vaccine rollout plan for our employees has not been solidified. Now, all of us do our research, and we take copious notes, and just like in the classroom, you always document what is most important and what stands out most. So I have a few notes, and don't worry, it won't be a dissertation. I've already written one. It's quite short. As of January 11, it was predicted that 16,200 to 29,600 new deaths will likely be reported in the week ending February 6, 2021. The National Ensemble predicts that a total of 440,000 to 477,000 COVID-19 deaths will be reported by this date. Today's date is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. And as of Tuesday, February the 2nd, the total U.S. deaths are 448,681. That prediction was on target. The United States has surpassed 26 million cases. Most of the deaths are among adults. However, in that group, we have 5,600 adults who we depend on daily to educate our students. If we open schools despite the local COVID-19 transmission rate, we will contribute to the spread of the virus, both within schools and within their surrounding communities. We all know that teaching online is possible. We see it. I sit 3 to 4 days a week with my granddaughter. I sit in the room with her, and those teachers are doing a phenomenal job. As a former educator, as a former teacher leader, and a program evaluator, I sit in the room with her and innately observe and evaluate the teachers, and I jot down things that I see going on. The teachers are building for transfer. They're inquiring prior knowledge. I see how they implement the classroom management skills. They engage reluctant learners. They accelerate learning for all students. I see them as they monitor progress for real-time learning and how they establish relationships and routines. As a former central office employee, I see the work that you all are doing. I see how you are problem solving. I see how you are troubleshooting, and you are rapid innovators, and I thank you. And I thank all of the teachers, and sometimes we say that teachers are working twice as hard. No, they're working 4 times as hard. But as I said earlier, teaching online is possible, but teaching from a grave, that's impossible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard Hall. Mr. Johnson, Dr. Greenman.
Thank you, Dr. Buck. I want to start by saying this is not my first nor my second choice for getting our children back in the buildings. I would like to see a 5-day-a-week school schedule with the return of the formal bell schedule. Not only has there been learning loss that could take years to recover from, if ever, we have lost instructional time between students and the educators. The district has cut instructional time from the school day, and we will never get that time or opportunities back. It is disappointing to say, at the least, that the majority of this board will not support a 5-day-a-week school schedule, even with all the research, data, and science that shows 5-day-a-week learning is not only the best way to teach and learn, it is also shown that with proper mitigation strategies, it can actually help slow the spread of this horrible virus within our community. Having a set, stagnant schedule is the best option for teachers, students, and families. It will also help the business community to schedule their employees who have children within our care. I know we have all gotten emails, phone calls, text message, and had conversations in store aisles with teachers about how much harder it is to do in-person and virtual together. Knowing this, I feel we will have teacher and paraprofessional burnout from having to continue to teach virtually and in person at the same time 5 days a week. I fear even more students will fall through the cracks. Further, I feel we will need even more reduced funding. We will see even more reduced funding due to students leaving for homeschooling, private schools, and family moving out of the county and opting for school districts that are providing them with what they need for their children. Due to this, I feel next year we need to take a hard look at having the families and staff members that want to be virtual transfer to the e-learning academy, with them knowing fully that it's truly an online school and not just virtual learning. We must ensure all mitigation practices and guidelines are being followed and they are appropriate for each age range. We must ensure families that choose to remain virtual or attend the e-learning academy have that option. We must ensure those families that choose to be in person have that option. For us to call ourselves a choice district and not having real choices for our families and communities, how can we really call ourselves a choice district? I do want to be crystal clear, however. I have not once supported taking away the option for virtual learning, and neither have any of my colleagues around this horseshoe. What I have been advocating for is those parents, students, and teachers that want true face-to-face learning with that option rather than a one-size-fits-all approach to learning. We must give families the options for sending their children to school or remaining virtual. We must give each school the option to be able to have more students in the buildings if they see they can do so with the proper mitigation practices in place. We must give the schools an option to be able to open the doors for a 5-day-a-week schedule and work with the district to do so. I do not think the 3-2 proposal is the solution. As I said before, there's not enough board support for a 5-day-a-week option, and I will continue to be a voice for all those parents, students, and teachers that want real face-to-face learning 5 days a week. At our next board meeting, I hope the superintendent and her staff will present a real plan for getting our children back in the buildings no later than the start of the 2021-2022 school year. With that being said, I do know that this is the best compromise that we have on the table at this moment, so I will be supporting the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Dr. Bringman.
Yeah, I'm going to make a couple comments on to why I will not be supporting this resolution, and then I do have one question that at least one question that I'd like to ask answered about the resolution. So, last week, the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, stated that only 59% of Americans currently are wearing masks. 59%. We're failing. A new data compilation formed by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health in collaboration with the organization Resolve to Save Lives reports that Chatham County is at an extremely high risk. Actually, it's at its worst level of community spread since the beginning of COVID. Contrary to what some of my fellow board members think, the CDC has not stepped away from data points. The CDC still references its purpose of indicators of spread as part of a reintroduction of in-person learning. And it states, and I quote on page 2 of the 9-page document, the CDC suggests decision makers use one or both of the first core measures of community burden in addition to at least a third core indicator to help them implement in-person learning. By golly, the first 2 core indicators are number of new cases per 100,000 persons within the last 14 days, or as we have discussed many times, the CTI. In this chart, it has over 200 as the highest risk of transmission in schools. We are currently at 505.5. And then the second core indicator, percentage of positive tests during the last 14 days. Currently at January 29, we sit at 14.4%, with greater than 10% putting us at a highest risk of transmission in schools. The last core indicator would be looking at 5 different key mitigation strategies. And I know the district is trying to implement all 5 of these, but after our last workshop, we know that there are still staff members that occasionally decide to go rogue and do not follow those mitigation standards. I'm guessing they're part of the 41% of our community that decides not to wear masks. If this resolution passes, we will be opening schools back to in-person learning when we have 2 of the 3 core indicators from the CDC stating that our schools will be at high risk of transmission, and with Johns Hopkins stating that we would be opening at the worst level of community spread Chatham County has seen throughout COVID. Furthermore, this resolution completely goes against what our principal and Senate stated in Figure 1, Figure 3, and Figure 4 that were presented to us earlier. Level of COVID, Chatham County metrics being the thing that they want to be utilized with operational decisions. In-person learning model should actually either stay 100% virtual or stay on the phase 3 in-person 2-3 hybrid model. And what do they believe is the most important? Offering a consistent learning model. Again, we'll be changing. I also, finally, think that it is absurd in point 4 that we would ever require a student to return to in-person learning against their desire in a pandemic, regardless of how they're doing academically. I will not be supporting this, and I really would love to know why we continue to push the 3-2 when our principals, our teachers, and unfortunately we haven't heard from all of our staff because their survey doesn't close until later today, are still pushing a 3-2 model. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bringman. Other comments from board members? Dr. Hoskins-Brown and Ms. Grabowski.
I offered an amendment, so obviously I'm supporting this resolution, although I am not in love with it. It has been my position that we needed to be virtual, and I have argued that we would not be able to run a dual system. We didn't have the funding for a dual system, and I didn't have the impression that staff who are already working as hard as Dr. Howard Hall has described would be willing to put in time for a dual system. We've talked about the reports that we've seen. We've heard from Dr. Davis, and even as early as last summer, we looked at the draft of the Schools in the Path to Zero report. We looked at it again. Our colleague brought it up to us last month. And I want to mention that what those authors put together was a conceptual model of what they thought would happen based on a review of data that's incomplete. And that is what everybody is having to do in response to the pandemic. They're having to try to imagine what would occur. And this is why Dr. Davis was not able to answer some of our questions. Conceptual models are built around some assumptions that, if we believe they're true, support what we think is going on. In that particular report, the authors have no data on one area that is extremely important to me, and that is the vulnerability of personnel to non-symptomatic students and staff. And it also states that household transitions are extraordinarily high, and we see the behavior in our community, we see the behavior in this room that contributes to that being a perpetual challenge. However, the one requirement that I had to be able to support this action is present. Well, there's two. One was the presence of a metric. The other was the ability for families to be virtual. In no presentation had we gotten any information that said we have the money to be virtual. And we don't have it now, and we don't even have our CARES Act money finalized at this time. But I'm pleased that virtual learning will continue throughout the school year. And I sincerely encourage families to use that option. That is the option that I think is most appropriate. That is the option that I believe is safest. But there are little children in the community that are at home, unsupervised, not doing virtual learning, and there has to be some options. I think that there should be other options that are handled at the household level. But I am pleased that the option that I believe is most safe is in this, and that is continued virtual throughout the year, despite who decides to take advantage of 3 and 2. I ask my colleagues to ratify all resulting expenses when they are presented, particularly when they exceed the funding that we're going to receive from the CARES Act. I support the 3-2-day model primarily because it is the one that has been supported by the principals and the faculty senate. And I support the resolution because it leaves the decision-making to the superintendent and the COVID-19 response team. But I also reiterate that these are all rights and options of action that the superintendent should have always had, did have, and would be preserved if we did not meet every month to reconsider what we see the superintendent doing. I hope the support behind this resolution will give the board comfort in knowing that their priorities are being considered, and leave the superintendent alone so that she can run the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grabowski.
Thank you. One comment I would like to offer that it is subtly referenced in the resolution is in regards to those students who choose to participate in the hybrid model. One thing I would like to ask the district to consider is for students who may be in a choice school, if they leave that choice school in order to attend another school for the remainder of the school year that might have space for them in person in the hybrid model, that they not lose their space at that choice school. So I would like to just offer that as a consideration by the district. And that may be already in place, I'm not sure. But as far as the resolution goes, I will be supporting this resolution. I appreciate the feedback that we have received from parents, from teachers, from the community. It's all been very valuable. While I do take that into consideration and I read every single email that I receive, I am not doing this for parents. I am not doing this for pandemic fatigue. I am doing this because I believe this is what is in the best interest of our students. I would love for us to move towards a 5-day-a-week model as soon as we can, but I also respect what we have heard from the district as far as our mitigation strategies, and I respect that those strategies have been put in place, and I defer to their guidance and their expertise as to what we can safely accommodate in our schools at this time. And as we have the ability to accommodate more students with the mitigation strategies in place, I am anxious to see us move forward in that direction. I appreciate the update from Dr. Levette about all the mitigation strategies that we do have in place, the improved filtration at every single school, the sanitizers that are in place, and all the other strategies that we have. We do have the updated guidance that we've talked about at length, so I won't go into that, but I do want to respond to our community's behavior and also implore that outside of the schools that we're all doing our part to mitigate this terrible disease. But I don't want our children to pay the price because the community can't behave. We know that there are children who are desperately struggling to learn. I'm especially concerned about our youngest learners. And we know that a child's brain is still developing. So after 11 months, for them to continue struggling with virtual online learning, that 11 months it's different for a child than it is for an adult. And it's critical that we return them back to in-person learning should that be appropriate for their family. I certainly appreciate that we have the option available for virtual and fully support that, but I support this resolution and encourage us to not let perfect be the enemy of the good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment of Mr. Catchmore and Ms. Hall? And we seem to be starting around again, so.
This is my first, I think.
I know, it is. It is.
And hopefully my last. I mean, we've discussed this issue multiple times over multiple months. I'll reiterate, at the end of the day, this is a moral decision. Lots of viable, legitimate concerns and complaints on both sides. I told some people this. I was in a Zoom PTA meeting a couple weeks ago, and while I was talking, two teachers texted me and said, "I'm really disappointed that you're in favor of returning to in-person learning." And then two other teachers texted me and said, "Good, I can't wait. We really need to get kids back in the classroom." My point is there are good, well thought out opinions on both sides. So it goes back, at least for me, it's a moral issue. And like I said earlier, and at an earlier meeting, and I was struck by Dr. Levette's comments today, because I will be supporting this and because I am choosing, I think, morally to put children first, it doesn't mean I don't care about teachers or transportation employees or anybody else in the building. All I am saying is when faced with a lot of good arguments, I am choosing to put what I think is children first and giving families the choice of in-person or virtual. I want to be clear, this is not opening the school doors wide open. I was heartened when Dr. Davis, during our informal, noted that current guidelines suggest that schools can and should reopen, but that they're subject, the best success will be contingent upon strict mitigation efforts. And of all the efforts he outlined, we have been doing them for months. So that if this is not a let's open all the schools 100% capacity and it's a free-for-all, this is an implementation of a hybrid plan with the continued strict mitigation. So that's important to me. I also think back to some of the survey data we've received, not just this time, but over the months that we've done surveys. Consistently, somewhere between 40 and 60% of our families have said we want to stay virtual, and somewhere between 40 and 60% have said we want to go back to school in some component. And consistently, between 40 and 60% of our teachers have said, I want to stay virtual, and 40 to 60% have said, I'm willing to go back to school. It struck me that 20%, somewhere around 20% of our school staff or teachers said, we're not getting the vaccine. I'm not interested in the vaccine. But then another significant portion of our school staff said, that's the most important thing to me when returning to school. At the end of the day, what we're doing is implementing a hybrid 3-2 program that I'll support because that's what a majority of the board will support. I want more than that, but that's not where we are right now. What I like about this resolution is that it provides a path forward, not just for getting kids back in school, but also for returning to 5 days a week eventually when the vaccinations come out, and we're planning for next year as well. I've received a lot of emails and communications from people who are vehemently opposed to reopening schools, and some of them have very good points to make. They've been hunkered down, social distancing, self-quarantining since the pandemic began. They and or family members have significant and legitimate medical issues, and I understand where they're coming from. But an equal number of people who have criticized me for supporting opening schools, I also see on social media, out at large gatherings without masks, taking pictures with friends and distant relatives and posting it on social media. And I'm sitting here, I'm kind of like Denise. At the beginning of the pandemic, I wanted everybody to hunker down and do the right thing so we could get together as a community and get over this and get back to school. But for some reason, our community, like many communities around the country, have felt it important that bars and restaurants and clubs be open and that they be willing to go and have a good time and all that, but then we get criticized when we want schools to open. Bars shouldn't be open when schools are closed. Or if bars are open, they should be more severely limited in what can go on there than what's happening with our schools. And I'm not picking on my friends who own bars and restaurants. I'm just saying adult decisions have perpetuated this, and I am tired of the kids suffering because of that. We can't control what the rest of the community does, but we can try to help our kids as safely as possible. So I'm going to support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ketchmark. Ms. Hall?
I just basically want to say to all of our political gurus in the county to get busy and get Governor Kemp to put our school staff and faculty at the front of the line with this vaccination resolution that we just passed earlier. That would be the key. And of course, as Mr. Cashmar just said, then we're going to have the problem, I'm a teacher, but I don't want to be vaccinated. Well, we can deal with that. But that is the silver lining if we can get there, that we can get 95% of our faculty and staff vaccinated so that we don't have to keep going through this harangue every month.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments from board?
Dr. Bard?
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Hines?
Yes, Irene Hines. Well, I made my comments at the beginning, and I
That's all
won't
right.
repeat those. But I think we have a workable resolution here. So we will, at this point, let the superintendent do her part in getting this implemented. And like Ms. Hall just said and others have said, try to get the teachers and the support staff properly vaccinated. And I think we're on the right road. So I'm real happy to see this in writing today, and I pray that we will move forward with it. And hopefully next school term, we will have all the schools open, full capacity, and this virus will be gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. Dr. Howard Hall, and then we need to vote.
Yes, Ms. Hall, I do agree with you about the vaccinations. That is why I think we should just hold on just a little while longer and wait. And for that reason, I will not be in support of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Howard Hall.
Well, may I just ask a question of Dr. Levette? When are we saying, see, that was what this operational feasibility is about. Do we have a date certain that this is going to begin?
There's not been a date established, Mrs. Hall.
That's what I thought.
We've not established a date, but I think one of the concerns, if I may, it is February 3rd, and school is scheduled to be out in May. And that's the challenge with children who really need support. They won't have, because Dr. Davis stood up here this morning and said, I don't know when the vaccines are going to be available. If I wait on them, then I'm not sure if the children will have an opportunity to get any additional time. And I want to also emphasize, because hybrid may be implemented does not mean people need to show up in the building. They don't have to do that. We had 7,000 in November that said, I don't want anything to do with that. Let me just stay at the house. And they probably have the structure set up so they can do that. But for those who feel like they need, and some of our students that I've talked to each of you about, those of you that I have an opportunity to talk to, I tell you, my heart aches when I hear from a mother who says, I work 3 jobs. I can't manage my children. I have to leave them alone. So I hear those people who really need the children to be in the building, and we're not getting the work from them either, so we don't know what's happening with them. So those children tug at my heart, and I can't sleep knowing that we have an opportunity to serve them. There are people that I believe they can take it or leave it. They can be virtual, they can, be at home, or they can come to school. But I do know that there is an acute need for some young people to be in the buildings. And so we would have to work with staff to determine as quickly as possible what are feasible dates, and then offer those to our parents and to our staff so that we can be ready. But I don't see, if I wait on the vaccine, I'm not hopeful that it's going to be in place before May 15th. And also, when I meet with the students, they have a whole different view on this. The students, well, the seniors are concerned that if we don't get something going, they're not going to have their in-person graduation. So let's just talk about what their priority is. But also the other young people, they miss their friends, and they feel like they want to see their teachers. And I understand that. They also understand the need for safety. But I would just say operationally feasible, we will need to work together as a group and try to determine what's best for staff, what's best for parents, with a priority given to our least independent learners and our typical developing learners coming right behind that.
But I want to push you just a little bit on it. Operationally feasible means you're not going to drag your feet. I don't accuse you of dragging your feet.
Right.
That you're going to move forward quickly.
No, and I didn't receive it that way either.
No,
thank you.
We just got to do it.
Right, because it has been said, oh, well, then you just wait until May 1st and say everybody come. No. Our buildings are ready, the things that we need to do to make sure that they're ready. Right now, we are going to be respectful of our parents. We want parents to do 2 things. Number one, we want parents to be able to adjust their schedules to make sure that young people can get the bus, they have after-school care lined up, and that they can make the kind of arrangements for children to be cared for once they get home from school. The second thing is the staff also has to make the same arrangements. So for me to say, oh, February 8th, everybody ready to go, that's not fair to them. When we presented in September, I said we would have at least a 2-week window so everybody would have time to prepare. The way I look at it is maybe by the last week of February 22nd, that if we can work with our staff and our families, that would be a launch date for our typically developing. Maybe on the week prior to that, we would be able to look at our least independent learners. I will not promise you sitting here as a mother or grandmother or teacher that next week would be workable.
I understand.
But I think we can work with our families and our staff to have them ready.
Any last comments?
Well, just a question. The children of employees who have been going to school, aren't they in school, in our schools now?
Yes, ma'am. We serve about 610.
Yes, ma'am, 627.
Right. But just be reminded, they're not all in one building.
No, but
so they're spread out. Maybe, I think the maximum number we have in any of the sites
35
is...
sites.
I'm sorry?
There are 35 sites, about 627 children.
Right.
Okay.
So the maximum we have in any building is 30. We won't go beyond 30. So you have the staff there with 30 kids. It's the difference between 30 kids and 300 or 400. So But we will do our very best in terms of looking at workable dates.
Comments? Before I call for the vote, I would just like to make my own brief comment. I intend to support this resolution. My ultimate goal as as board president, I started to say student government president. My ultimate goal is, as board president, is to open school in August, 5 days a week, or as near to that as we can for all students who desire that. Saying that, I have backed my own thought process up through summer to where we are today, and I believe strongly that we need to start, for those kids who choose to do it, to put kids back in that discipline of 3 to 2, and I would love to have 5 days a week, but that's not going to happen right this minute as far as I can tell it. I am pushing, and I have said this to the superintendent several occasions and to board members, I believe that a key to our future is, we're a month and a half, 2 months from this year being over. The key to our future is a robust summer school program where students are encouraged. I know you can't require summer school, but make it as attractive as possible to have a full program of summer school going with as many kids as we can put in a building safely, so that by August, when we come back, we're ready for 5-day-a-week person learning. That's where Joe Buck is. Hearing no other conversation here, all in favor of this resolution as amended, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ms. Hines?
Aye.
7. All opposed?
Aye. Is that me? Okay.
All opposed is 2. The motion passes, the resolution passes 7-0. Thank you very much for a spirited discussion. Moving forward, Ms. Hall, I'm sorry we missed 3:30, but we had important things to do today. Moving up to the Board of Education matters, we have 3 items that are here for first reading. We don't really need to belabor a lot if you have made your comments already or have other comments, but saying that 8.01 is internet acceptable usage, and this is a policy and a regulation. It's been noted what the deletions, et cetera, are. Any comments from you as board members? Hearing none, remember that this is a first reading. It will be, the policy will be voted on at the next meeting. If you have changes between now and then, make certain that the superintendent and Mr. Hedigan know those changes so we can address them. Moving on to 8.02, Policy 2, and administrative regulation on testing. Mr. Catchmore.
This policy was adopted a few years ago, in large part because there were ongoing complaints and concerns about the amount of testing that we were doing in schools, testing being rolled out ad hoc and with little warning, and that was a perception of some. And it led to a spirited debate about, what's a test versus what's an assessment. And I understand the difference. A test is, an assessment is to see where you are and to help with, education moving forward. But what this did was to make us sit down as a district and plan out the testing plan and assessment plan for the year, be rolled out in July, and then everyone was on the same page, principals, teachers, everyone could plan around the testing calendar, and as changes would occur, there would, there were provisions in here for emergency changes and modifications. I continue to be concerned about the amount of testing and or assessments that we do in the district. I still hear from a lot of teachers who complain about the amount of testing and assessment. That said, I understand, some of the testing is required by the state or the feds, and then some of the assessments have real value. So where I've ended up on the issue is, as a matter of policy, I want notice and predictability, but it's up to Dr. Levette and the academic team to make the decisions about what testing and what assessments need to happen. My concern here is this is being changed from we're going to roll it out and any changes and modifications are approved at the next board meeting to if there are changes, we'll let you know, board. The intent of this policy was to ensure predictability for everyone. And so I'm a little concerned about making that change. I haven't heard a rationale for why the change is necessary. I haven't heard why, what problems we've run into that are leading to this change. So I'm not saying I'm 100% opposed to it. I'm raising my concerns, and I'm happy to have an offline discussion between now and the next meeting to kind of flesh those out. But I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page in terms of what the intent of the policy was and where we are now.
And your concern really has to do with the redlined area, which is saying changes have to be approved by the board, and that's being struck. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
If I could add just very quickly, this is the first time we've heard that concern enumerated that detailed. So to provide a response, we've noticed in this operational, primarily under the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously, that a lot of changes have come down from the state, and we've had to make adaptations to the testing calendar. And frankly, we've had to bring it back to the board as a ratification. So we didn't see that the policy as currently written was really feasible in the way that operations were going, with the potential for possible changes. I'm sure there's possible middle ground language that we can find to keep the board fully appraised as much as we possibly can in the front end, but we did feel that there were some concerns bringing ratifications to the board as pertains to this policy.
See what y'all can do to move us forward.
Dr. Buck?
Yes, I'm sorry.
We can
Dr.
simply,
Hoskins Brown.
thank you. We can just do an exception to policy for this year, can we not? And that way, you don't have to worry about ratifying, and you don't have to change the policy.
I think you're right, but I think that that was only a premise to get the whole thing changed for the future, is what I thought.
Okay, well, that's what I would just be interested in knowing, is the intention. I mean, I was supportive of the change in the language as it is, and so if it is that we're wanting to change the policy just in general in the future, then we can just get that justification in the next meeting. If it's not robust, then we can just do a suspension of the rules for this year, and I guess for next year, given that we're going to have some of these same effects from the pandemic.
Mr. Feliciano, did I see your hand?
Yes, sir, you did. I think we can reach a middle ground. Obviously, the state has taken action in cutting back on state testing. We have also made changes to cut back on assessments, but we can certainly change the language that can meet Mr. Katchmar's concern and also our concern with quickly adopting any changes that need to be done.
Any of you board members that have specific concerns, I would charge you with, kind of writing down briefly your concerns and getting those to the superintendent and Mr. Hediger, and they can move it from there and try to work us through this next month, okay? Anything else on testing? Moving through 8.03, student records. This is also a first reading. Much of these records have to do with FERPA anyway, so it's not a lot change, but anything concern you that you're seeing in the proposed change? when you get home tonight and just need some really exciting reading, and you read through it again, if you think of anything, call Dr. Bringman, and he'll write it up for you. And, right, Dr. Bringman?
I'll be seeing a counselor.
But really, let us know, let them know. Anything else on those policies? We have a proclamation for National School Counseling Week, and Ms. Grabowski is going to read that into the record for us, and we'll pass a resolution on that.
As proclaimed by the Board of Education on February 3rd, 2021. Whereas school counselors are employed in our schools to help students reach their full potential, and whereas school counselors are actively committed to helping students explore their abilities, strengths, interests, and talents as these traits relate to career awareness and development. And whereas school counselors help the parents focus on ways to further the educational, personal, and social growth of their children. And whereas school counselors work with teachers and other educators to help students explore their potential and set realistic goals for themselves. And whereas school counselors seek to identify and utilize community resources that can enhance and complement comprehensive school counseling programs and help students become productive members of society. And whereas comprehensive developmental school counseling programs are considered an integral part of the educational process that enables all students to achieve success in school, therefore, we do now proclaim February 1st through 5th, 2021 as National School Counseling Week. In witness thereof, we officially affix the seal of Savannah-Chatham County Board of Public Education to this proclamation on this third day of February 2021.
Ms. Grabowski moves that approval, second by Mr. Katchmar. I don't think there'll be any discussion on that except to say that we also have a proclamation from the city of Savannah that proclaims this as National School Counseling Week. So we congratulate our counselors. We couldn't do without them. They play a very vital role for us, and on the times we live in today, they're even more valuable than they've always been. So all in favor of this resolution, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ms. Hines?
Hines, yes.
Hines, yes. So the motion passes 9-0-0. Moving on to the consent agenda, can I have a motion for the, Dr. Hoskins Brown moves the approval of the consent agenda. I don't think there are any other changes to that from just the consent agenda. Can I have a second on that? Second by Ms. Hall. All in favor of that motion, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Hines, yes. 8.
All opposed? 1. You voted yes today, right? Yeah, I wasn't sure. Mr. Johnson voted no. 8-1. The motion, consent agenda passed. So we're moving past consent. Moving on now to Goal 1, which is the 4-year cohort graduation rate. That is certainly a good news item for us.
Good afternoon. It is my pleasure to present the 2019-2020 cohort graduation rate. Also would like to remind you that this presentation is a synopsis of the superintendent's notes regarding graduation rate that was shared with you. Just as a reminder, and recognizing we do have a new board member, wanted to remind you how our graduation rate is calculated. It is the number of students in the cohort who received a regular education diploma divided by the total number of students who entered 9th grade in that particular cohort year. And you subtract the total number of students who entered 9th grade in that cohort year that you have documentation for regarding transfer or that may be deceased. So we had some different variables as it relates to our graduation rate this year, and we call these, of course, our COVID-19 impacts. So we had decisions that were given to us by the State Board of Education. They waived the requirements of the Georgia Milestones end-of-course assessments. And the biggest impact from that was the fact that it was required to be 20% of a student's final grade in those particular courses, and that was no longer the case. Also, we were granted flexibility as it relates to awarding credit based on course completion and mastery of the course, and not based on time during the semester. We also had Local Board of Education suspension of policy IHF, which were our graduation requirements. We reduced our number of credits by 1 unit from 24 to 23, which put us in line with the state. We eliminated the 20-hour community service requirement. We also took into account that we did a spring pivot in our instructional delivery model, moving from in-person to virtual. And guess what? We rock. Our graduation rate is 89.7% for school year 2020, which is a 1.9% gain from 2019. To put that into perspective, we graduated 2,035 students, not counting summer grads. And here's the chart. This was included in your superintendent's notes that reflects that data. It should be pointed out that we are outperforming the state and our comp group, as we always do. Some of the key points: it was very important that we point out our students remained focused and met the requirements during a pandemic with all of the shifts and challenges they faced. Of course, we've consistently improved since 2014-15 our graduation rate. And as I said, for the 6th consecutive year, we have exceeded the state average in the graduation rate. Early college, Woodville-Tompkins maintained their 100% graduation rates, and we saw declines, unfortunately, Groves-Johnson and Savannah Arts by 0.5 to 3.6 points. Pointing out Beach Islands, Jenkins, New Hampstead, the School of Liberal Studies at Savannah High, and Windsor Forest improved their rates with gains from 0.7 to 5.3 points. So what are our actions at the district level? We maintained our graduation team. We continue our swarm protocol in a virtual format. We continue our focus to provide support for schools. We do have our No Graduate Left Behind meetings that are being conducted virtually, and our senior counseling sessions are virtually or by appointment, where they focus on attendance, credit acquisition, and post-secondary options for students. We also have the introduction of the No Freshmen Left Behind meetings for parents and students, making sure that they understand as 9th graders what those requirements are and what's needed to move forward. We are allowing for flexibility to add additional sessions of Twilight to support credit acquisition, and we are declaring March our Senior Engagement Month. And during that month, we will be having socially distanced, safe senior meetings in which our seniors will be able to submit cap and gown measurements if needed. Now that they know they are having an in-person ceremony, they'll be getting information regarding that ceremony and any upcoming class of 2021 celebrations. So we're simply moving it from the auditorium to parking lots, making sure that it's safe given our current climate.
Questions from board members? Thank you, Dr. Ball. Ms. Ball. Mr. Johnson.
It's actually not a question, and I know sometimes some of y'all out there, when they see me raise my hand with reports, you get nervous, but don't on this one. I just want to say congratulations to you, Dr. Levette, and all of the academic affairs team for this amazing number for the 6th year in a row, beating the state average. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you, and we would be remiss if we did not tell you that congratulations belongs to every high school principal, middle school principal, and elementary school principal, because it's a K-12 event and it belongs to every teacher and counselor in this district. We're just here to back them up.
Thank you. Other comments from board members? Ms. Grabowski?
I just want to quickly, congratulations, absolutely, and thank you for your hard work to you and to all the team. And also thank you for the clarification from Dr. Levette earlier and also from you just now about the in-person graduation for our seniors. That is, I think, so important, especially this year, so thank you for working so hard to make that happen.
Dr. Buck? Dr. Buck?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Irene Hines. I would just also like to add to the others in thanking our administrative staff and all that they've done. As you recall, when you and I rotated on the school board, these numbers were not as they are now. They were way down. I think I remember 54 being in my mind. But nevertheless, we've come a long way, and it has taken hard work with the teachers, the students, as well as their parent support. So we would just like to thank you for all that you're doing, administrative staff, and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. I think when Ms. Hines and I came on the board, I think she says 54. I remember like 57.6 or something like that. So we've really
stand to be corrected.
Yeah. Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, I'd like to also say congratulations and that something did good come out of 2020.
Yeah.
At least we can celebrate the graduation rate. And I'd just like to ask how we're engaging parents for this year, for the class of 21, how we're engaging them to ensure that they are familiar with scholarships, especially those athletes with understanding of clearinghouse.
So our counselors have done a really amazing job in terms of making sure that they are holding events that not only engage the students but also the parents and providing information. They've already started to track our scholarship dollars and to make sure that they are working with those young people in small groups and then reaching out to families as well for those students that qualify and holding sessions. I myself did a session for a group of seniors, and there were parents participating as well about how you write your college scholarship application if you're applying for a scholarship, and gave them some scholarship information. Our counselors also maintain a website with all of that information. They're doing one-on-one sessions, not only with the senior, but they're inviting the parent as well. And then at some of the senior meetings that they've been holding virtually, parents are welcome to come. And we're also providing an incentive to ask parents to attend our meeting that's upcoming during our March month.
And I'd just like to also say that one positive thing that we can say about this online learning is that it's prepared them for college, because now they are familiar with what it takes to be successful when taking online courses. So something good came out of that also.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Mr. Catchmore.
I'll add on to the congratulations. Took a lot of hard work by a lot of dedicated people, both downtown and at the schools, to make that happen. Not just yet last year's success, but the sustained success. So thank you. Two things I'll add. My oldest daughter, was one of the graduates last year. So thank you for getting her there. I appreciate that. So does she. Interestingly, obviously, she's in college, and I stay in touch with her, obviously, but I know a lot of kids who graduated, not just last year, but the year or two before as well. And one of the things I always ask them was, how prepared did you feel for college? How are you doing? And to a person, they tell me, we felt prepared, we were ready. There was rigor that we had in high school. The level of academic classes that we had really prepared us. So we're not just graduating kids, but we're graduating them ready for the next level as well. So I appreciate that. And then finally, I'll be quick to say this did not come from my daughter, but it has come from parents and some kids who graduated last year, who didn't have an in-person graduation, we did a great job last year with the virtual graduations. To the extent, and I'm going to use a phrase we used earlier, to the extent operationally feasible, if there's an opportunity to offer something to the families who graduated last year to participate in some in-person ceremony in conjunction with or after or before, just let's think about that. I think it would be nice. We told them back then we would continue to think about them if possible. I'd like to respond to some of those requests.
And if you could, Mr. Katchmar, could you have them reach out and contact me or contact their school principal as well so we can capture that information?
Okay.
Okay.
I'll be happy to do a social media blast, but maybe a survey or something. I don't know what's operationally feasible. Health and safety comes first, and we don't want to impose on this year's graduates. I'm 100% on board with that, but to the extent we can do something and think about it, I'd like to at least talk about it. That's all.
Any other comment? Oh, Ms. Hall, I'm sorry. I didn't
Okay,
see you.
just mainly, I'm very eager to hear what Dr. Levette has planned for us with these graduations. So I guess we'll be in suspense until she decides to tell us. But the main thing I wanted to say was, in line with Mr. Cashmore, I'd love for Mr. Hediger to head up a task force of maybe 11 counselors from the different high schools, and let's track these kids over the next 4 years. So we see in 2025, where are they? What are they doing? How is life going? So that we can really see if we can pat ourselves on the back. It's very heartening to hear what Mr. Cashmore is saying, but I'd like to hear, how our kids going straight into the military, straight into the work world. Let's see how they're all doing in a few years. Thank you, Mr. Hediger.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Any final comments about our graduation rate? Congratulations to everybody. I will pat us all on the back. So, last agenda item is a contract renewal.
Final contract renewal, bid number 1606, Food Products and Distribution Services. On September 5th, 2018, the board approved the contract award of bid 1906, Food Products and Distribution Services to U.S. Foods Incorporated of Lexington, South Carolina, and Genio Turkey Store Sales, LLC of Wilmar, Minnesota. The initial performance period for this contract was for 1 year period, with 2 options to extend for additional 1-year periods. On August 14, 2019, the board approved the first renewal of bid 1906, Food Products and Distribution Services to U.S. Foods Incorporated of Lexington, South Carolina, and Genio Turkey Store Sales, LLC of Wilmar, Minnesota. The actual expenditures total for the first renewal are as follows. U.S. Food Incorporated, $5,538,671.49. Genio Turkey Store Sales, LLC, $76,881.41. At this time, staff recommends the board approve the second 1-year renewal of this contract at the same terms and conditions with an estimated annual cost of $5,615,552.90. Thus, be it resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent that the board approve the second 1-year contract renewal of bid number 1906, Food Products and Distribution Services with U.S. Foods Incorporated of Lexington, South Carolina, and Genio Turkey Store Sales, LLC of Wilmar, Minnesota, for an estimated annual amount of $5,615,552.90 at the same terms and conditions.
You've heard the resolution. Is there a motion? Mr. Johnson moves. Dr. Hoskins Brown seconds. Ms. Johnson, anything?
All I gotta say is we need to support our food nutrition program as much as possible. So thank you.
I just figured I would second it since I used to live in Lexington, South Carolina.
That's a real reason to do that, I guess. Any other comments from board members? All in favor, raise your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Irene Hines.
9. Motion passes 9-0-0. I have no other business, but before I call for a motion to adjourn, I would like to very briefly say to the public that this board works hard to think about the children all the time. Regardless of what sometimes we're accused of, we're concerned about their safety and their learning. as well as those of our staff. I would ask, as parents and as community leaders and as people out in the community, that you try this week to be the best example you can be for all of our students. Try not to be so negative about what's going on in our world today. Try to look more positively at what you see that you like in the world. And even more importantly, in some ways, wear your mask all the time and get vaccinated as quickly as they become available to you, because that's the best way you can teach responsible citizenship to all of our children. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Hall moves, Mr. Johnson seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, Board.